Hello ladies, welcome today as we continue our study on the sixth period of Bible history known as the Period of Conquest. Thank you for joining me today as we continue our study on the sixth period of Bible history that we call the Period of Conquest. This is part 2. If you haven't listened to part 1, I hope you do that. So we're just going to get right into it. In the last lesson, we learned how that Joshua is now in command of the Israelites and their army, and that they're right there on the outskirts of the Promised Land. And he has sent, in the last lesson, we talked about how he sent spies into the city of Jericho. We mentioned how Rahab hid those spies for their safety, and she wanted God's protection because she knew that the destruction of her city was about to happen. And so now we're going to pick up after the spies leave Rahab. And they come back after just a few days to the camp, and they report to Joshua that the people in Jericho are actually really afraid. And so Joshua starts making plans to break camp, to move across the Jordan River and to move into Jericho for that battle. And he tells the people, when you see the ark passing in front of you, the Ark of the Covenant, you're supposed to follow that. They had been following this Ark of the Covenant for years. And these children had grown up. Now that they are, adults themselves, they had, known nothing different than following that Ark of the Covenant. We remember that in the Israelite mind, that was actually the presence of God with them. And so following the Ark is like following God. And so before anything else goes on, it's important to talk about 2 different ways that God encouraged Joshua. He wanted Joshua to know, he wanted the people to know that he was with Joshua as much as he had been with Moses. And there's 2 ways he's going to do this for the people and for Joshua. So as they get ready and they follow that ark, they get ready to cross the Jordan River. And God stops the river. As soon as the priest's feet touch the water, the river stops flowing, and the Israelites are able to cross over on that dry ground. Now that sounds familiar because that's what he did with Moses and with the Israelites leaving Egypt. So this is a sign for the people that God is with Moses. He's with us, he's with Moses, or he's with us and he's with Joshua. And so that was a good thing. And another thing is after they crossed that river, very soon before they were going into Jericho, God presented himself to Joshua, and he called himself the commander of the Lord's army. Joshua first sees him, and he says, "Are you with us or against us?" And then this person is introduced as the commander of the Lord's army. And so here again, and then he commands Joshua to take his shoes off because where he is holy ground. So obviously this is God, a form of God, there in front of Joshua. And it's a sign for Joshua that the Lord is with him. Like he had promised him already that I will be with you and I will fight the battles with you. And he's saying, I'm the commander of the army. I'm here ready to go, basically. And so they go into Jericho. They follow all of the instructions. They're supposed to march around the city once every day quietly. And then on the 7th day, they march around it 7 times and then shout. And the walls fall down. I'm going to link to a very interesting video about the excavation of the city of Jericho. And it's actually interesting that the very walls that the people in Jericho thought they were protected by, that's actually how the Israelites had an easier time getting into the city. So I think that'd be so interesting for you to watch that video. So they followed the directions and everything went the way God told them it would go. And they were supposed to go into the city, destroy everything, take nothing except the gold and the silver and bronze and iron, so that they could put those in the treasury of the nation of Israel. And so they did that. That's what they were supposed to do. We're going to find out how that did not exactly go as planned. So the Israelites had been commanded to take nothing from Jericho except the gold and the silver and the iron and the bronze. But one man decided that he didn't have to obey God. He thought maybe he could hide it, but he did take some things. He took some things for himself. No one knows. No one knows but him. So now that they are in the promised land and they have had a very victorious first battle, the plan is to march straight into the center of the promised land. And the next city that they're going to fight and take over is a city called Ai. Now, some people say that is pronounced I. I've always heard it called Ai, so that's the way I'm going to pronounce it. But Joshua, again, like he did at Jericho, he sent spies into the land. And this is kind of humorous that the spies come back and they say, well, you don't even need to send all of us in there. I mean, this is going to be very easy. So that's what they did, except they were defeated at Ai. And Joshua is in despair. He lashes out at God. He says, why have you even brought us across the Jordan? It would have been better for us to stay on the other side. Does that sound familiar? Remember the Israelites said that, like, why have you brought us out to the wilderness to die? You should have just left us in Egypt. Well, here's Joshua with that same mentality of, he's just so confused. And his first reaction is to blame God. He tears his clothes and he falls to the ground. And then God says to Joshua, get up. Why have you fallen on your face? And I read those words studying for this lesson, and it is really convicting, because how many times, I know I have, and I'm sure I'm not alone, have I fallen on my face? And I'm just distraught because of something has happened. I feel like, why is God letting this happen? Why is God doing this? That's what Joshua was doing. But see, we have to remember, like Joshua, that we don't always have all the information. We don't know what God is doing. We cannot understand everything that God is doing. And in this case, he is punishing the camp, so to speak, because there's sin in the camp. That's what God finally tells Joshua. There is sin in the camp. And, they had been promised to obey God, and they actually had, rules to follow, and specifically at Jericho, not to take anything. And so that was just convicting to me, that sometimes we need to step back, and I hope that God doesn't have to very many more times in my life say, get up, and why have you fallen on your face? I've told you I'm going to be with you. If you follow me, I'll be with you. And we need to trust that he will do that. I think this time period, the Bible is full of encouragement for us to trust God. They find Achan is the man who took some things, and he and his family are killed because of that disobedience. And then Joshua they do go into Ai, and they do finally defeat the city. And then Joshua builds an altar there, offers sacrifices, and he also creates 2 new stones with the law on them, rewrites the law, or copies the law into 2 new stones, and he reads it again to the people. So we can see from here on, Joshua is very dedicated to following God. He's going to obey. He's just a great encouragement to me to just trust God. And I think Joshua learned his lesson, and he's just a great person. I love studying this period of history. We're going to talk about some of the other battles. Now, the first 13 chapters of the book of Joshua, that's where we're studying this period of conquest. It's mainly the book of Joshua and first 3 chapters of the book of Judges. But those first 13 chapters really, to me, seems like more like a narrative of the battles. And we can read about many more. There's one of my favorites to teach little kids is the Gibeonite deception, where these people who live in the land are scared, and they fool the Israelites into thinking, oh, we're from a long distance away. They bring moldy bread, and they bring old clothes and torn up shoes. And so they trick the Israelites into making a treaty with them that they don't destroy us. We're just passing through. And of course they're lying, and they're not supposed to be doing this, but it just shows human nature. weren't just fully trusting in God. The Gibeonites did. They made them basically work for them as woodcutters and something else I can't remember now off the top of my head. But they were, not supposed to be making treaties with anyone. And so it's a lesson to really just fully trust God there again. But and then also there's a battle. The king of Jerusalem gathers up 4 other kings, and he wants to put this invasion just to be done with it. And so he gathers up, a lot of kings and their armies, and he's going to fight Joshua in this Israelite army. And so in this battle, Joshua asks for the sun to stand still. Basically, he's wanting more time. They need time to defeat these armies of these kings. And they do defeat. God stops the sun, and they do defeat these armies. And so everything Joshua did was successful. And we're told it's because he did everything God told him to. He worked and he trusted God. He fought the battles bravely. And, if God said do this, he did that. When we've learned he wasn't perfect, but he was just a very faithful person. And then, so those are the first 13 chapters. It seems to me that after, or the first 12 chapters, but the chapter 13 through 22 seems to be more of a record of the kings that they fought and the land distribution. I know that one of my favorite parts of this time is actually the story of Caleb, where he's one of the faithful spies from 40 years ago who first went into this land, and they all came back telling bad things about it, the giants, and he was the one saying, we are more than able to take this land. Well, here's Caleb at 80 years old, and he asked Joshua, when they are dividing up the land, he says, give me that hill country. He wants to go back to where he saw those giants. Is that not just wonderful that the very thing that scared everyone else, he is more than ready to go defeat these giants. The Anakim is what the Bible calls them. And so we know that most of them were defeated. It's interesting that if you read earlier in the book of Joshua, during the narrative, that they did kind of drive out the giants from a place called Gath. That may ring a bell if you know that Goliath was from Gath, who was a giant. So it just adds to this whole idea that giants weren't just mythical creatures. I hope you looked at that video and article that I linked to last lesson about giants and fossils of giants. But also another part of this, the vision of the land, it's just really important to remember that if you see a map of the 12 tribes of Israel, you're going to see a tribe for every son of Jacob, the 12 sons, except Levi. He did not inherit land. He inherited the priesthood, the Bible says. And so they have actual cities and pastures in all of the tribes that they are going to inhabit, so that they can minister and serve in the areas all over the promised land. And also, you don't see a tribe for Joseph, but that's because instead of giving Joseph one inheritance, he actually gave him a double inheritance. And that's where we see his 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, inherit a tribe. And so that's how the 12 tribes came to be what they are. So it's very important as we study through this to understand how God works with the people and he encourages the people, and how to show the stories of faith that they are exhibiting here. Most of the time they are. And it's just very encouraging part of Scripture, I think. So to wrap this this period of history up, at the very end of the book of Joshua, in chapters 23 and 24, the people, we're starting to get glimpses that they have not exactly followed everything up into the first 3 chapters, or the first 1 or 2 chapters of the book of Judges. Actually, we can see that they did the job. It seems like they just got tired. They didn't finish the job, and God tells them that this is going to come back to haunt you because you didn't do everything. You didn't go ahead and do everything. By this time, Joshua is an older man. And a very, very beautiful part of the last part of the book of Joshua is that Joshua is encouraging these people to choose to serve God. he reminds them that, he says, you have a choice. You can serve God, or you can serve the gods of the Egyptians. You can serve the gods across beyond the river. And the river he's referring to is Euphrates, and he's really talking about Abraham's father and grandfather, who apparently served false gods. And he said, you can choose to do that. Or he said, you can choose to serve the gods that these people here serve, or you can, serve the one true God. And then the beautiful statement, but as for me and my house, I will serve God. And I think we all need that resolve in our world today. When we see so many false religions and so many distorted doctrines, and even just the plain old God of self that more and more people are wanting to serve, that it's important for us to make that decision to serve God, even when we're surrounded by people who don't. So this is the end of the period of conquest. We're going to study what happens to the Israelites now that they're actually in the promised land, and they fought the battles, and they have sent a lot of people away. Not all of them. We're going to find out what actually happens because of that when we study next time on the period of the Judges. It's a really interesting and not quite as encouraging time, but a lot of lessons we can learn about the 7th period coming up in our next lesson. So please don't miss that. Don't miss the links that I'm going to link to in our worksheet. And please share and like and subscribe, all those things that help social media be better, and so more people might come across this. I would really appreciate it. Thank you again for joining me.